At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Focus on Liberia on the marketplace where we talk everything finance, business, and economics. Focus on Liberia, we promote everything that is Liberia, that elevates Liberia and educates Liberian. Today we have a very special topic to talk about today, and we have our guest in the studio, Mr. George Famule, and we have Ava Tokpa with us today as the two guests we have in the studio. Wherever you are, as we like to say, please take a moment, share the show with your audience, your followers, and stick with us for another hour and a half as we cover our topic for today. I have my co-host in the studio with me, Alex. Welcome, and gentlemen, welcome. And I think Alex will have the opportunity to allow you guys to introduce yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabriel. Welcome back also. Last Saturday you were not here, so I had to step in there and do the controlling and all that stuff. So, but we had a good show. But thank you for coming on today, and as usual. Today we'll be discussing Liberia's identity system or identification system. We will be diving into understanding of what is the composition of Liberia's identification system. We'll be looking at personal identification and physical identification. We'll be looking at the reasons why Liberia has not or has established or has not established a proper or a well-established personal identity and physical identity. We'll be looking at the Liberia's National Identification Registry. We'll be doing a comparison with that, its function, and how does that compare with the legis, for example, the National Elections Commission, the Social Security Administration, passport, law enforcement, and all that stuff, and what is happening at the National Identification Registry. And we have no other than Mr. George K. Famule, who has written on this subject, and also our man Isaac Vatoba, as he's called, Ava. Josh, Ava,
Yes,
welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, can each of you give us some 60 seconds intro? I know it can be whole day, but your profile is big. But can you summarize it in 60 seconds, Josh?
Well, okay, so let me go first. I am what I call a recovering software engineer. I worked in software engineering for about 25 years. Right now, I am a healthcare CEO. My wife and I own a medical practice in Arizona, and I bring the technology aspect to the management of the practice and all aspects of data management. I have extensive experience regarding identity, identification, and those issues, and how they will propel Liberia to much greater economic heights.
I'm Isaac Vatupa Jr. I operate currently in the sustainable development space as the CEO for Sustainable Development International. In my prior life, working in corporate America, I was into healthcare systems, healthcare project management, healthcare operations. Um, Jordan, I have been behind this Better Liberia thing for more than the ages of many of the people who are listening on this show. Since probably like 88, we have been very
Oh boy.
extremely actively involved. So we feel we see the problem, we feel we understand the problem, and we try to share as much as we can about the problem that other people because our advocacy is coming towards an end. It's time for other people to pick up the baton and run away and try to move us to a better Liberia.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You're muted. You're muted, Alex.
Isaac, you're getting me afraid. So many things hanging on your wall there. All kind of certificate,
Well, some of them are degrees, some of
degrees,
them are certification.
and all kind of things.
Yeah.
So
Why you come to the show with your background like that, with all that thing? You're scaring me, man.
There you go. You want me to see my location?
Just a little joke there. No, don't do that. Just a little joke.
no,
Put it back.
that was it. That was a joke. Don't
Yeah.
don't
That
don't
was just a joke.
don't mind that, man.
Just a spike or some
Gentlemen,
joke.
welcome to the show.
No, but
Thank
the
you.
main right to ask though, because we're
Right.
just talking about that today. Academic fraud, academic
Yeah.
dishonesty in Liberia is high. Everybody pattern resume, claiming academic credit credentials and
Yeah.
degrees they don't have. It's just sad. But that's another
That
topic.
that is another topic. But we have what we want to start with today. It's before we dive into the show. I think it's something pressing that is currently happening in the country, which is I think you guys probably are more aware than I am with the current increase of the rice prices in the country. I don't know if did you guys see the memo at all?
Yes, I saw the memo. I even did a post about it. And
So
yes.
I think this is something serious that is happening in the country, and we wanted to maybe take it maybe for the next 10 minutes or so to hear your thoughts on that. Thoughts on Alex.
I mean, my thoughts on it has been, known from day one, from even before the CDC government, that we needed to get into food production in Liberia to ensure food security. That has been my position from day one. To come in as a government and talk about subsidizing rice importation, I
Right.
believe that was a wrong move. We have
Thank you.
5 years as a people
Mhm.
to grow food. In actually 2 years, with the land space we have, with our environment, with the right irrigation and some level of mechanization, we
Mhm.
can be food secure in
Yeah.
Liberia,
Yeah.
honestly. And but the government has not paid our attention. Even right now, the attention they're giving to Jagba, asking. We all started working together and talking about those things.
Yeah.
I was a part of that whole operation and everything. But
Yeah.
because sometimes my name, when they see it, is a different story. So we pull back and let other people go ahead and do what they need to do because it's
Right.
about Liberia. It's not about your ego or how you feel.
Yeah.
But we have been telling government invest in the small farmers, invest in semi mechanization because we still
Right.
need labor. We need to balance it. We can't just automate, mechanize everything.
Right.
But make decentralize the rice production in all the areas, whether it's highland rice, whether it's lowland rice. Let's do it that way. Unfortunately, they didn't listen. And these guys in government today, a friend of mine, Dr. William here,
Mhm.
we have been working in this agriculture area since like 2012, 2013. He has a PhD in the area. He's a soil scientist and he runs a whole farm. I invited most of the people in CDC government today, the key people, to
Mhm.
that farm. He accommodated them. He explained
Mhm.
the entire process. He explained how we can start from where we are today to
Mhm.
be able to be food producers enough for our country and be able to export food.
Yeah.
They never resonated with them for some reason.
Yeah.
I just don't understand how. So we are behind the eight ball. And then when you subsidize the rice business, it creates impediment to a more functional market economy, right? You
Yep.
guys know if they lift the restrictions they have on rice importation, I believe the price of rice will drop.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Mr.
but Isaac,
Fumbler.
Isaac, as we're saying,
So
let me ask Isaac this question. Yeah, Family, you can give your opinion, then I can ask question. Go ahead.
well, so my take on this is basically from a numerical perspective.
Mhm.
One of the things we have to remember is that right now Liberia has 4.5 million people. In 2030, Liberia will have 6 million people.
Yeah. Well,
That is a
over 5 million. So yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So
We're
that is
5.1 right now.
that is almost a 25% population increase.
Yep.
One of the things I want to stress is that there is a huge difference between trying to feed 1.5 million people and trying to feed 6 million people or even
Absolutely.
5 million people.
Absolutely.
And I don't think the recognition has sunk in for Liberians of the scale that we need to have to produce food. We
In
need to
order
produce
to
food
right.
on an industrial level.
Yep.
Okay. So when it comes to all of the issues we have with food, rice being our staple, the fact is that we have not made an effort to industrialize the production of rice. And that industrialization includes mechanization. That industrialization includes creating a supply chain.
Mhm.
That, one of the things I tend to say is the people who grow the rice should not be the people who sell the rice.
Thank you. Yeah.
The people
Or
who grow
market
the
the
rice,
rice.
they should be, or market the rice. The people who grow the rice should be just the people who grow the rice.
Mhm.
You can create an entire supply chain that will produce, that will grow that sector of the economy, where you have people who are milling rice, you have people who are transporting rice, you have people who are retailing rice.
Yeah.
But we can't continue like this, unless we reevaluate all of our food production.
Yeah. I agree with you, Alex.
Yes, sir. So, whilst we're there, this is just an icebreaker. We will move on to our topic, but we like to recognize some of our viewers. In the meantime, we got a host of viewers that are watching, and they already have some comments on. So we encourage you to share the show and continue to come on. We'll consider your comments at some point. But Isaac, the question I wanted to ask is we also in the diaspora, we also feel the pinch of what is happening in Liberia. Um, I have paid I have sent so much $35 for bag of rice. So you're talking about bag of rice is moving from $13 to official is $17.50.
On paper.
Yeah, but
Yep.
what we've been sending to our people is far more than that. So uh, how is it? The pinch is being felt by everybody. It's been felt by our people in Morovia, and it's been felt by us. We have to increase the budget of what we send to our people. So is it realistic that the price is going to be $17.50?
No, the price already 1850. I believe I sent you a video. You should play the video with you know somebody who has sent funds on the ground to get some rice. They are sent based on the $15 price supposedly, but the price is actually 1850.
Yeah.
Where she could get it, so she couldn't get it 20 bags or whatever she wanted. She had to get like 17 bags, and then we'll get additional money to get the other bags. So
No.
no, it's not enough, and this thing is serious pocketbook pressure on Liberians in the diaspora.
Mhm.
We do send significant money. I can show you my send wave, and you can see the list of money I send to people. Now, if we're actually growing the rice and creating jobs, and along the entire value chain, like George just mentioned, plus the supply chain that relates to agriculture,
Right.
we create jobs for people. The thing is clear. We do have the opportunity to do that. We have some advanced technologies to help accelerate the production of rice. The seeds now they take a shorter time to germinate and grow. So until government gets serious to help those in the areas of agriculture, even here in the US, if you guys not aware, no farmer just operates on his own in the US. They subsidize significantly by
Heavily
government
subsidized.
because
Heavily.
government know how important it is for food security. If you can,
Mhm.
in any pandemic or epidemic, if you cannot feed yourself, you got serious problems.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, hopefully that mindset can change. Sometimes, I'm of the opinion. Sometimes I'm like, man, let the people suffer. But it's hard to see people suffering, especially if you have something that you can give them. So now you can't help everybody, but some of them you can help.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our country, man. That's why we do what we do. But thank you for your view on that. I think Gabriel, is it time for us to pivot to?
Yeah, I think we should
Yeah.
gentlemen, thank you. That's we just wanted to open up with that because it was something pressing. We just
Serious.
wanted to hear your thoughts on that. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that as well. But I think you guys came here for a different topic that we wanted to talk about. So I think it's time we should pivot into that, um, and get the ball rolling. So Alex, I will.
Yeah, so our topic for the day is Liberia's identification system. So I live in the United States of America. In fact, all of us live on this show live in the United States of America, where you have what you call a social security number, which identifies your person, right? So everywhere you go, you have to give your social security number. Of course, it's protected all kinds of way. And also, you have a physical identification, which is your address, where your mail go, your physical, your mailing address, and the physical address, if they are different, right? So your physical address and your mailing address are the same as your home address, you have a mailing system. I mean, you have a mailbox. You put your address in a Google map. It will take you. You drive to the person's house. When I work in Sierra Leone, they have similar system there where you say, oh, go to 50 Wilkinson Street or go to Wilberforce Street, and you just, I mean, it was at that time of my first time visiting Sierra Leone, and I could find my way just by the address, and the taxi driver could drop in there, and they also could give the mailman will even get down on the road and walk all the way behind there because we have 50A, 50B, and those kind of stuff. But we don't have stuff like that in Liberia. So I was just trying to lay the basis to make it simple so that our viewers can understand it, because I know Josh is passionate about this and Isaac as well. So what is Liberia's identification system?
Or crisis. Yeah.
Isaac, you want to go?
Isaac, you're muted.
So we have the National Identification Registry
Okay.
that by law is supposed to identify every Liberian biometrically at this point. And before that, they will say we have a national identification system, but there was no real national identification system, no designated system of record or system of truth that was supposed to have one identification for every Liberian. And we now have the National Identification Registry. But we got other areas that to help support that process, whether it's the birth records, whether it's the hospital records, whether it's all those things that come together. But unfortunately, the government, and it's not necessarily only this government, the previous government has not supported the identification registry program. So it's not well funded, and there's no requirement in general that number is the number that you have to use, whether you want subsidy, whether you want to go register your business, whether is your and we'll come to that cannibalization of these people, whether it's your social security number that should be a NASCAR and all of those things. And the law is clear on where this national identification issue should be. It should be with the National Identification Registry, and it should be like a service bureau for all the other agencies of government that need to use identification. Now, they don't say you shouldn't require identification, you can. Or licensing, that's different from national identification. There's one record for national identification. Then, based on that, you can use that to get your license, right? License is just the ability for you to drive. Anybody from any country can come in your country and they want to drive, right? And you want to track everybody who comes into your country as well.
Yep.
So, even on social security card, when you came first, when you didn't have the privilege to work, not valid for employment, it was there. So the national identification is very essential, but we have not taken it as that. It is the fundamental thing in terms of development. If you don't know your people, you just don't know anything about your country. That's the primary thing. So George, you can pick it up.
So let me tell you basically where this passion comes from. I read a book a while ago, and I've given out several copies of this book by a Peruvian economist named Hernando de Soto.
Yes.
And the title of the book is The Mystery of Capital. Why capitalism works everywhere else, why capitalism works in the West, but fails everywhere else. And it became clear to me that there are two reasons why that happens, why capitalism fails in the developing world. One, in the West, everybody is identified. Once you are identified, you can become part of the formal economy. Every piece of property is identified.
Yep.
And now you can tie a piece of property to a person or multiple people. People can then use that property to acquire capital. So let's take the case of somebody who bought a house 20 years ago. From the day they took that loan to buy that house, the value of that property has been going up.
Yeah.
Correct? They borrowed $300,000. 20 years later, that house might be worth $800,000. They've paid off their loan. Correct? And so now that person has created wealth or access to capital
For himself.
of $500,000. You can use that capital now to fund your small business, to do other things, and help essentially expand the economy. So without our ability to identify property and its ownership, we are stuck. I mean, if you look at the Constitution of Liberia, it says only Liberians can own land.
Yeah.
Correct? But Liberians, the only way they can maximize the return on that land right now is to lease it to a foreigner for 20 plus years. So the foreigner develops the land and they basically get nothing out of it.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is this: banks cannot lend money on property whose provenance they can't prove.
You're right.
Okay? So when you bought your house in the US, you were not responsible to take your deed to the bank. Records are held by the state, or it's held by your county. Correct?
Yes.
You take that to the bank. The bank then does a record search or a title search.
You're right. Yep.
And from that title search, they can find out everything they need to find out about the property.
Who the previous owners were.
Who was the previous owner? Who has a mortgage on it right now? Okay, and then your real estate agent will set you up with a title company or an escrow company, and the title company will set up the escrow. And the purpose of the escrow
To pay taxes.
is to ensure that everybody who is involved in that property gets paid appropriately.
Yep.
Okay, the reason a bank can't do that in Liberia is because if a bank lends you $300,000 on a piece of property that you provided the deed for, that you claim you own, 2 years later, somebody else can come back with a deed, take you to court, and say this property actually belongs to me. And guess what? The bank is out of money.
Yep.
So they don't do that. So this is a huge impediment to the growth of the Liberian economy. But let's pivot back to the national identification number. So when this law was passed, I believe it was in 2011, that they would create the National Identification Registry.
Yeah.
And this Essentially, it says in the law that this will be the biometric identifier for the Republic of Liberia. It says in the law that this number will also be known as the Social Security number.
Yes.
Okay? Let me make one thing clear. Identification and licensure are two different things.
Different thing.
Okay? Identification simply says Percy Harris is who he says he is.
Mhm.
Okay? Any other licensure that Percy Harris seeks to do something, to perform a task in society,
Mhm.
whether he wants to drive, whether he wants to go to school, whether he wants to
Be a craftsman, whatever.
be a craftsman, whether he wants to be a professional. Okay, if he's a lawyer, if he needs to get a law license, that law license is independent of him being identified, but the identification is required.
So, George, then what is this identification? This particular identification that is for a particular person to identify as, what is it?
Okay, so what they do is they do a biometric identification where they take your fingerprints
Okay.
and they match it up to your fingerprints and your photograph, and they save that in the database.
Yeah.
This means that anywhere in the world that you show up, being able to pull those two things up will identify you out of the 8 billion people in the world as the person you say you are.
So, do they assign you a number?
Yes, they do.
Sign your number. That's
Yes.
a unique number for only you. Nobody else can get that number.
Nobody else can get that number. So by law,
Mhm.
the system exists in Liberia. The problem we have had
It's implementation.
is that there is money in identification.
So
And
what
has happened?
what we are talking about is the personal identification. We're identifying a human being.
Right
Correct.
now.
Personal identification. Okay.
And there's
Correct.
also asset identification that we haven't gotten to yet, but what George touched
He
on.
touched up on that.
Take
Yeah.
the
So let him
ownership.
go. I like how you're taking this
Okay.
this topic.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead, Josh.
So what has happened in Liberia is, as I wrote in the last paper that I dealt with, the reason the government of Liberia doesn't function is because all of the different portions of all of the different agencies seek to cannibalize whatever service the government is supposed to provide.
Mhm.
Let me give you, let's use this particular example
That
because
kind of a word, you gotta break it down.
it's poignant,
Lord Jesus.
okay?
When you want to eat your own baby.
Yeah.
When you want to eat your own, okay? So let's use the case, we have a national identification registry that is responsible to identify all 5 million people in the country. We accept that, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, now, the National Elections Commission is responsible to register all eligible voters and
Not
produce
identified.
the voter rolls. So, do we understand the two different terms I used?
Yes.
The National Identification Registry is responsible to register the individual,
The human being. Each
the
human
human being. The vote,
it's-
the National Elections Commission is responsible to essentially register an identified person to vote.
Yeah.
Okay? What has happened is the NEC has decided that they are going to take on the task of the
registering,
National Identification Registry.
which isn't supposed
So,
to be.
so George, hold on for the understanding of our people. So the National Identification Register, the NIR, that
Mhm.
has the law passed in 2011. I
Correct.
read portion of the law, their roles and responsibilities. and one of their roles and responsibility is to establish a biometric identification.
Biometric, yeah.
So
Correct.
that biometric identification is the identification of the individual 5.1 million Liberians with
Correct.
a number.
Each one, yes.
So if you want to register for election, you are already identified as a Liberian
Correct.
with a number by the
Correct.
National Identification Registry.
Right.
100%. So
Then-
what is the
Then
Go
what
ahead,
is
I'm
the
sorry.
NEC supposed to do now to say that you are a registered voter?
It's
You already
different.
identified
It's a
as a
separate-
the NEC is supposed to say that me, George Fambule,
Yes.
You are who you say you
I
are.
am eligible to vote.
Right.
One, because I'm more than 18
Okay.
and I can vote in Tiwot District in Grand Cape Mount County.
Exactly.
That is the voter roll that the NEC has to produce. It
So then
tells you
what is the whole barometric thing this whole NEC doing now?
That's what he
That's
said.
the-
They took it over.
they took it over.
Right.
They decided that they were going to take on the full responsibility.
And that's
which
not
is
their
not
responsibility.
theirs.
Right.
It's not theirs to do, and there was discussion around it. The,
Right.
the NRR even wanted to work with Next. Say, look, y'all give us some of your people. Let's collaborate and work together while we do the identification thing. So whatever we do is not strange. And once that database rests with the NRR, they got something called mirrors or views, or just a data pool, just a simple query on that data can give them everybody 18 years and above.
So let me hold you there. Let not make this, because people can be very sensitive because of politics. So let not make it appear as though it's this government's failure, because
So
this is an old age problem that has been going, but at some point we got to fix it.
I think that's what they're trying to get to try
And
to
I know that
diagnose the problem.
effort was made in the previous government to even establish the National Identification Registry. So from year to year, some effort has been made. So what is whether that Ellington, whether that Charles Taylor time, whether that we are time, what is the now that we understand that the National Identification Register is the one that's supposed to give us our quote unquote social security number that identify, that have our age, that have our everything there, I have our fingerprints and everything there to identify us anywhere we go in the world. What is particularly the NEC supposed to do to now make us a voter instead of this whole biometric thing we're talking about?
So here's how it's supposed to work. The NIR does not have a budget. Okay? Doesn't have a budget, but that's not a problem. Because what is
$3.5 million?
Hold on. What is supposed to happen? The NIR is supposed to be a service bureau to any government agency that needs identification functions.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the NEC says we need to register 3.5 million people,
They'll go to the
and we believe it will cost us $10 million to do the biometrics. That portion of the NEC's budget that is required for the biometrics should have automatically been transferred to the NIR
Yep.
to allow them to do their job.
Their job, okay.
So now you have NASCOR. NASCOR also has a responsibility to register everybody in the country and every working adult in the country and their dependents and their beneficiaries. Okay? So that's pretty much the whole population.
So such the seen as the Liberia Revenue Authority, such the seen as the National Board.
No, not Revenue Authority. Revenue Authority, for the most part, deals with taxes, but the person has to be registered. The person has to be identified. But civil service, passports, right? Students who go, any person who may request a service from the government, a benefit or service from the government, should have that identification.
But look at the distribution of even food during COVID or during Ebola. How can you identify who's who really if you actually saying we're going to this community to distribute food to these people? You don't have a real national identification. so people can claim, as they have always done, that they divided food to X amount of people, but you cannot go and find those people and validate that through any kind of M&E, monitor evaluation process, that those are the actual individuals who are, 80 years old and above and who needed to get this food. That's why we get so many complaints.
So let come back to the National Election Commission, because that's
That's a key.
An issue of discussion right now. So how will you stop at the point where you would have transferred that budget for the National Identification Registry to do its work, right? But my point is, the National Identification Registry was established and they started their work. I, sitting down here, I have an ID card with a number for Liberia that was identified by the National Identification Registry. So I have my fingerprint, everything at the National Identification. I have my card as a Liberian. Okay, so that means they're supposed to complete this work for all the Liberians.
Yes, but they can't. Okay, so here's my thing. They don't have a standing budget. So because there is service bureau,
they have a budget, but not a budget for the identification purposes.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
They got salary budget, simple, slim budget.
Right. So, but because they are a service bureau, they are the government's identity contract house. So let's say the Ministry of Agriculture has to identify, I think they had a program a few years ago where they needed to identify farmers. Correct?
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? Is the Ministry of Agriculture going to do its own identification process? Or is it going to go to the NIR and say, listen, we need to identify farmers and we believe there are 250,000 people who are farmers. So in our budget, we got $7, for each person. We need to have these 250,000 people identified. University of Liberia, we need 33,000 students identified. Civil service, we need 30,000 people identified. This is something that happens over time. The reason we don't see that pressure in the US is because this has been going on for the last 50 or 60 years in terms of people getting Social Security numbers. So because they've reached critical mass, the number of people who are added, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But in order to build this system, because this is the system that our economy will be based on, we cannot transition from a cash economy to a credit economy unless we can identify everybody.
Yep.
Okay? You can't grow. Listen, I tell this story and it's passionate for me. Me, George Fambule from Oro Cinco, right here. Nobody knew me in America. I went to the car dealership to buy my car. The man put my Social Security number in. He said, how much the car you want? I said, that's the one I want over there. He checked it. He said, put $2,000 down ticket. He asked me for my money. He asked me for my body. He asked me for my brother. Mind you, I have a son named George K. Fambule who lives at the same address. Why did that happen?
Because you identify.
Because you were identified.
Because I am uniquely identified in the society.
Okay.
So what does that mean? Now let's think about it on an economic scale. What is the difference between people having to pay cash for everything versus people having credit available to secure assets like automobiles, like homes? You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. Huge.
In terms of the economic growth.
Huge.
This is what it would take to transform Liberia as an economy. You cannot move from a third world country to a first world country without this system. There is no country. You look at the Asian tiger nations that have done this in the last 30 years, they have all followed the same plan. There's not another way to do it.
So Josh, the reason why I got an identification number in Liberia is because working in the government, the Ministry of Finance, I think it was 3-4 years ago, during this administration, the Ministry of Finance insisted that before we got our salaries, at a certain moment, I think it was 4 years ago, before we got our salaries, each entity that is submitting their list for the salary should ensure that every employee got their identification.
National identification.
Yeah, if you didn't get if one person in that entity didn't get their national identity, the whole institution will not take pay.
Wait,
So
you had to
because
submit a list to get your salary?
that payroll processing as part of the process.
But here's the thing.
So
here's the thing.
That's part of the normal.
I can. How many Flomo colleagues are there in Lofa?
Plenty.
Thank you.
Okay.
How many John Sharif? I know about 5.
In fact, the Gizi people, fire, Tamba, plenty.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to drive you at is with what I'm saying is that there was a requirement. So as a result, most of the institution had to send their employees to get their identification because they didn't want one person not to take pay. So let's bring that to the election commission back again. I'm interested in the election commission. So how will now the election commission ensure that everybody now gets a voter registration?
But that's what he's trying to say, though. That is not their job.
Everybody.
No. He's saying voter registration. So now,
everybody can be registered to vote.
Let's assume
provided you are identified.
Right. Let's assume.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So you got to deal with identification first.
All
Liberians. Go to the registration of the voters.
Yes, the identification. Right. Let's assume everybody identified. Right. So now, what NEC need to do is tell us who all are above 18 years old and where are they located. So NEC is responsible for doing the demarcation of the different precincts XYZ.
Right. And assigning an identified voter to a precinct.
Exactly.
What is the rule?
What if they don't have the identification thing down pat? So how do you expect them for that number that they're going to give for it to be accurate?
Okay, so exactly, because when we look at the last election in 2017, when the ECOWAS team came, that was one of the first things they said. In order to create accurate voter rolls, you have to have an accurate way to identify the voters.
Right.
And the way to do it is via biometrics. So now the question becomes, NEC says, well, okay, since this was an election problem, we're going to do the biometrics. The law is not set up for NEC to do the biometrics. And let me tell you people, let me give you this, okay? So right now we have NASCOR doing identification, right?
Yes.
We have NEC doing identification.
Passport.
Or try.
We have passport doing identification, and we have NIR doing identification.
You got National Archives.
Okay. Well. So now we have 5 entities that are all producing an identification. Okay. That will all have 5 different numbers. That I could show up. My name is George Kamo Fambule. I could show up to NEC and say my name is Kamo Fambule. That's the only name I got. I could go to NIR and say and they will give me a card with a number.
And each of those different identifications are valid identifications. Supposedly.
And here's the thing he touched on point. He alluded to that. George alluded to that, right? Because there is money in printing those things out. This is why everybody is in
money in implementation. So
how do you bring it into one system, one place, into
one system with political will and leadership.
Right. So we have a country of 5 million people, but we're going to end up having 15 or 16 different registered people in multiple systems. So the system doesn't work that way because then you introduce the possibility of fraud. You can't have 2 social security numbers in America.
Yep.
You just can't.
Yeah, you're right.
That's fraud.
Well, exactly. You can do it, but they can catch you.
It is fraud.
That's so
right. If you go to get a driver's license, and you don't have a social security number, what are they going to tell you? You need a social security number.
Yeah.
That is the foundational identifier for anything. You go to open a bank account, you apply credit, any benefit you want to get is based on that single, not multiple, single foundational identifier. And that's
sometimes you
the
don't even need to
point
get any other information. You can get
we're
loans
trying
just
to
for getting
get to.
started your number.
We need to get to in Liberia because, systems, I've always say that every problem Liberia faces has been solved somewhere in the world before. Only in Liberia do these systems not work. And this is a glaring example of exactly why they don't work. Because where the rule is that there should be a single entity identifier for a country, we have decided we are going to create 5. How is it going to work?
So that is the problem.
Well, Batancula says that they're all fighting each other for turf.
But it's not about turf because the law is clear.
The law is clear. It's just that some people got more voice. They got more support with the people.
Yeah, this is not about a fight for turf.
How it should be.
Well, here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing, though. If I think I keep going back to this, I think George alluded to the problem there, and the biggest driver for which everything is separated is because there's money imprinting those ID out, right? If the president is aware of that, or whoever is in charge of it, that this is the source of the problem, and because these other entities are jumping on it because there is money imprinting these things out, but it's also detrimental to the progress of the country. What does it need to take in order to centralize it in one place for them to which is the NRR, to be able to say, this is your job, you're supposed to do it, and shut the other places down that have been giving out IDs? There got to be something.
I said it before.
Right.
If you got leadership with integrity, it's simple. They will interpret the law as the law is written. If you got people who want to scheme the system, we know through procurement, that's the most corrupt act in the whole republic, the whole procurement process.
Remember at the beginning, I said that the reason Liberia doesn't work is because government agencies cannibalize the function.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me give you another quick example. The legislature. Each of the legislators every month get a vehicle maintenance stipend. They get it as a separate portion of their money. That cash is for them, whether they maintain their vehicle or not. Meanwhile, we have a GSA garage.
That's supposed to be fixing that. Yeah.
That is supposed to be servicing these vehicles.
Yeah.
But if you take 102 vehicles, even if you say they're getting $200 a month, right, to service their vehicles, you're still talking about $20,000. You're still talking about $250,000 over a 12-month period that should go to GSA Garage. But the GSA Garage doesn't get that money because the legislators chop it up, they cannibalize it, and they take it individually. Fiber optic cable has been at the at the Capitol building since 2011. They do not have a local area network in the Capitol building. You know why? Because each of the legislators take money for internet services as a stipend. Are you all following what I'm saying?
We are, yes.
So that means that there's no general internet service.
And there's no incentive to do it either.
Yeah.
In the Capitol, there's no shared printing services. All of these things that they could do is because they have decided that the budget for internet services maybe is $300,000 a year. Okay, maybe it's $400,000 a year. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to divide it among each of ourselves. When I talk about cannibalization across the government, every time you can look at that and see that this is what these people are doing. So we can't actually build institutions. You know, let me give you the example of Liptelco and Amara Kone. When Kone was the head of Liptelco, of when he was finance minister, Liptelco is the government's telephone company. They are essentially supposed to manage all of the government's communications.
The data, yeah.
Okay? So in a perfect world, every government minister with a cell phone, that cell phone service would be purchased through Liptelco, even if it's purchased from another carrier. Liptelco would do all of the management. Kone decided, you know what? Instead of us giving that money to Liptelco, guess what we're going to do with it? We're going to give every minister.
Wow. You're muted.
You're muted.
So right there, that's the part of the cannibalization right there, where funds that were intended for
Josh, you
to
muted.
manage government services without shared services, they were giving that money to each of the different government ministries and agencies. And so that kind of paralyzes the telco even carrying all its function, its operations.
Am I back?
Yeah,
you're
back now.
Yeah, so Josh, let's
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but before
He probably can't hear us. George, drop off and come back.
Josh, can you hear us?
Hello.
But
Yes,
while
we
we're waiting
can
for
hear you.
Josh, can we recognize Dipuzo? Welcome. You've been there for a while, been quiet listening to us. We probably want to hear your voice more. Welcome, my man.
Thank you. How you doing, Alex? Thank you, Gabriel. How are you? This is my first time meeting the great Azif Vatupa.
Hey, Devu.
Wow.
How are you doing?
I'm good,
I'm
man.
great.
How you doing?
Ava, you got a fan in a
Got a
cry.
friend of the great Azik Vatu.
And you know,
Let me wear I'll clean him and begin.
Yeah, you got a fan.
thank you. One thing I was just thinking when I've been listening to you people clearly. I know Liberia has so many problems. It's not easy to just tackle it from everywhere, but sometimes it's always good. When you take one policy issue, you look at the entry point towards this resolution or towards a solution. So my question here is, where is the entry point for this whole data path for national identification? Where do we start from? Because to say the NRR is just scheme is an entity, but if you look at it, someone who was born in the 70s, you don't blame them because of NRR just came to existence in 2011.
No.
Where the problem came from? Where did it start from? How do we go into the system? How do we solve the problem? So which entity has the first responsibility for data collection?
Well, data collection now is a big thing. That's different from national identification because data collection is a whole other bigger problem across the country. In data collection, you get George excited here, but data collection is a little different, right?
Yes, I understand, but the national identification starts from where?
The national identification starts from the National Identification Registry by law. It didn't exist like 2009, 2010, or anytime.
The law was passed in 2011.
2011, the law was passed.
So what is the entry point to this NRR? Assuming that NRR, okay, assuming that
let them execute their responsibility and fund them to appropriately do it. I think since that place being organized, it's been adequate time if they are being funded to fully register every Liberian.
But let me answer Mr. Zuo.
I want Mr. Fambula to, because the thing about it is that coming to a existence, the existence of this, in fact, it was in 2011. Yes.
Mr. Zuo, let us start with this, okay? This is the only agency in the country that has the authority to do that. That is where you start. So it doesn't matter what other questions you have. It doesn't matter who's doing what. It doesn't matter who is not doing what. This is
so
the
where do they get a record from to start?
They create the records. They are the ones who are supposed to create the records. There
So
is no other.
let's take an
Hold on,
example.
Isaac. There's no other
We're
place.
playing devil's advocate. Don't mind.
There is no other place that is supposed. They are supposed to create the record. When you say where do they get their record from to start, they can't create biometric records out of thin air.
Right.
Okay, they are the ones who create.
How do you know that? How do you know that Debuzo is a Liberian for you to identify him?
Okay, so there's different measures, right? Like we said before, there are other agencies. There's here in the US, once you're born in the hospital or whatever, that information goes straight
Correct.
to Social Security, right? We don't have that in
So-
Liberia. So it takes work. It takes an environmental scan, meaning you go all the areas that could affect whatever your mandate is to do that. And then
So,
you got
so
to
the
decentralize. You got to decentralize this work. It's not something that people just sit down in Monrovia and do. You got to decentralize it. And because our people have never been identified, you got to rely on accent. You got to rely on the chief and some other family member identifying
Correct.
people. You got
But
to
it also
rely on different
means.
sources to then establish this record of truth. Because when
It
you're not
also
establishing
means.
your biometrics with your identification, that's
It
you.
also means
Never change your
that
name.
that it also means that the Bureau of Vital Statistics that records births and deaths, they will also have to play a part in this process.
Right.
This is
now,
a this
you
is
see,
this is a whole
you
of
see,
no, but hold
Let him
on.
finish. Let him finish.
Hold on. This is a whole of government effort. And I think it defeats the purpose to say that because when Zua was born, he didn't have a birth certificate. Therefore, we are not going to identify any of those people as Liberians. It seems as if that's the crux of the argument that you're trying to make.
no,
You can't
it's
do
not
that.
the argument.
Okay, I will listen for your argument.
So let me say this to you, because the thing about it is that in as much as we are looking at, because the demographics, statistics will come first, it starts from the birth. So if you create an entity that came into being in 2011, the first thing that there is that before the entity starts, there must be some requirements or intersectoral linkages and say, look, what sector should be the first entry point? We got a Ministry of Health, further statistics that actually show clearly that, look, do we really have better data on the birth in a country and death in a country that will be able to identify that, look, this number that was assigned to the birth number that was assigned to Edwin Paul, he died in 1960, and this number had not been assigned to anybody else. The birth of Edwin Jones, 1940, is still as Edwin Jones is still alive. So these are the first entry data point that the NRR or NRR will have to go to first to say, okay,
That is incorrect, my friend.
So let me.
That is
George,
that is 100.
George,
That is 100% incorrect.
George,
When did
before you-
Social Security start in the United States?
No,
George,
George,
before you come on, let me
George.
bring a comment. Let me bring.
No,
a
let the man
comment.
answer the question. We'll go
George,
to the comments later. Let the man answer the question.
Before you get Social Security number,
Stop-
what do you
stop
use to
comments.
verify, to
No.
authenticate that this person?
Listen to me, sir. I'm asking you a question. When did
Yes.
Social Security begin in America? Did it begin in 1877?
No.
Social Security began in 1937. When
It
Social
came
Security
in
began in
Roosevelt
America,
time.
when Social Security began in America, they already had more than 100 million Americans.
Yes, but they have to
Okay.
use a birth data.
Okay,
They
but
use birth
even all
data.
of that, even all of that was not perfect. It's not, and my friend, let me tell you, it's only in the 1980s when they started assigning Social Security numbers to infants.
Yep.
Before, kids would have to be 15 years old before they could get a Social Security number if they wanted to work.
Yep.
Before that, so what do you do?
Hold on 1 second too, George. Even up to like, I want to say probably like the early 1990s, I don't think the Social Security system was really integrated.
It wasn't.
You got people.
So assuming that the United States that have almost all the sophistication and technology could not have the identification from one entry point, It has several points.
But you
What
gotta
about
understand-
Liberia?
No, you try to find an excuse. Hold on, George.
I'm not finding an excuse.
No, you
This
trying
is
to
a
find
debate. This is a
excuse.
debate that you. This
Okay,
is a
so
debate from the
what is
beginning.
the-
I saw you.
what is the essence of your
I saw
question?
you
What is the
linking the
essence of your
debate
question?
on asset identification, individual identification, and all these things have been brought together. Because the first thing that the credit rating, the credit history cannot just come from one end. It has to be it's tailored. There are some linkages from different areas that come together. So you can't just jump out and say, okay, NIR having the authority, but NIR just don't have to do everything.
So listen, Mr. Zuo.
Therefore, we said that before. We're not operating in a vacuum. There's no vacuum that NIR can operate with other government entities.
But the NIR has to start somewhere.
And
my question is, if not now, when?
That has the law on the side.
And I'm waiting for you to tell me. No, it's not.
We got to talk one at a time. We got to talk one.
No, it's not working.
So since I'm bringing, let me just.
You can't fold your hand at defensive posture. You got to relax.
That's fine. Let me fold your hand.
Okay, let me take out. I want to remain quiet and just listen to both of you. But I'm trying to stimulate the debate.
No,
the thing about it is that
you're right to ask the questions.
The issue here is something non-existent. If you want to have it, you must always have a baseline.
So let me ask you a question.
So they are the baseline.
So let me ask you a question. How did NEC register 3 million people to vote in 2017?
No, start from 2005.
Okay, yeah, or in the early election. So wait a minute now. The baseline that you're talking about, what I'm saying to you is that at some point, a government agency identified at least 3 million people who were Liberians and were eligible to vote. Is that not correct? That's a yes or no answer.
Correct.
Okay. So if you can start, if you start with those 3 million records, that should be, since you are arguing for a baseline, that's a baseline for you.
Well, how do you verify this? How do you verify this?
The NEC already verified them for them to vote. How did they allow them to vote? The NEC has already verified them to vote in the last 2015 election. Now you're asking me to go and verify them again? What are you doing?
Mr. Fambole. Mr. Fambole.
I love this conversation.
I'm saying you have the NEC there having data on Liberians and the number of people who are eligible voters. You also have the Ministry of Health, which is responsible for birth registration, that they now have a birth registration across the country in the hospital. You also have, in fact, for entry, which of course immigration purpose, you got the LRS, Liberia Immigration Service, that is also there responsible. So all of these things, you also have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that are also giving birth certificate, passport based on birth certificate. These are all the data that can be synchronized, because the reality there is that instead of us just
nobody disagrees with you. The question is the question here, Mr. Zuo, is what is the entity that is supposed to do this?
That's what I was trying to ask.
That is the basic question, and that's the question that you're trying to get around.
Right.
The thing here is that in as much as you are looking at National Identification Registry, NIR, one of the things that is very much important for Liberian entities, whether Ministry of Health, NIR, whatever, there's a need for people to learn to do what we call intersectoral linkages in development planning.
We understand that.
So Ministry of Health is Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education. In fact, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, these are entities that play with real citizens on a daily basis.
No, but so let me cut you off right there.
That's what they're saying.
Let me cut you off right there.
That's why those data will be gleaned from. That's why those
because by the time you go, the way it's supposed to work, by the time you get to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you should already have been identified.
Yes. If that was correct.
But because of where we are starting from, we know that there are 3 million people being identified already by the NIR and by the NEC as Liberian citizens. There are already 3 million people. So if you said that the NIR would start from that group of people, We are starting from 3 million identified Liberians with date of birth, because the only way you can be registered to vote is you have to be of a certain age.
I also want us to get to the economic part of this thing, this whole
Yeah,
topic here of how that is
yeah, we'll
important,
come to that.
how
But,
the
So
other
let me
aspect of it, we never touch on the other aspect, but I also want us to get to
let's
that. But
just
I think
satisfy Defu.
we're beating down
You
the
probably need
horse
to
down here.
go and look on the NRO website.
I'm glad that someone just mentioned the school statistics, school data, school enrollment.
Yes, enrollment. There you say John Peter register, but what's the unique identifier for anybody who in school today?
How many John Peters are there in Liberia?
To register them. There's no requirement for any unique number, no requirement for identification in Liberia to go to school.
Good. So the question here is how is the NRO rolling out its registry?
But isn't this just what we've been discussing?
In charge of that right now.
1 second. I mean, they got to go what they know first. So if you look at the form, they will ask you for documents that prove, just like sometimes in the US, how they can ask you for documentation, whether that your driver license, whether that your passport, whether that your previous voter ID, whether that your birth certificate or your green card or any other form of information. That's what the NRO will ask you for. So if some other entity of government is considered a valid entity, that and the identification it gave you is assumed to be your unique identification, you will use that. But the resulting thing is when they take your biometrics and give you that number, you lock into that. So that's how you identify going forward.
Up to now, do we have? I'm just my brother. How do we know? How do we know? How many persons have registered under the NIR to for us to assess now to say, okay, the real Liberians that are there, out of 5.1 million, we have gone 10%, 20%, or 50%.
You hit it on the nail the first time, probably 10%. Because
my understanding is they have data on about 500,000 Liberians. Okay,
why?
But that data is separate and distinct from the 3.5 million voters that the NEC registered in the last election.
Why are we stressing on voters when we know that the voters registry was condemned because they were double voting? Because
there is the identification now. That is the reason why there was double voting.
You're making the point for the necessity.
No. But let me answer this question. Let me answer the question.
Why would we make?
Let me answer the question.
NEC data.
This is very simple.
And we're not going
very simple.
Why we not going to high school? I'm asking. Why are we making NEC data?
Let me finish this question.
Why are we making NEC data as an entry point and not high school registration or Ministry of Health data?
Do you understand what biometrics? Hold on. Do you understand what biometrics do?
Jesus, please explain it.
Do you understand what biometrics do? Biometrics uniquely identify a person. So if I started with the NEC voter roll and I had 3.5 million people and there were 43,000 duplicates on there, I can't have 43,000 duplicate biometric signatures.
You can.
You understand? So even the process of using the NEC voter roll would eliminate the duplicates because you are creating biometric IDs for each individual person.
I agree, but I agree, but I think the political side of it and the economic side of that debate is what I'm concerned about.
Okay, Debu, let me answer that.
Yeah, because you're making it, but you're not making a statement as to why you're asking the question.
Yeah.
Like you want to play devil advocate, but make the point as to why you're playing the devil advocate, what you want to ascertain.
Hold on, Gabriel, just hold on. Formula, just hold on. Debu.
Yes, sir.
Are you a personally identified Liberian?
Yes, I am. I have my national identification.
I ask you a question. Don't answer the question.
Just say yes or no.
Yes.
Are you a personally identified Liberian like I am?
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
How were you identified?
I provided my driver's license.
Okay.
Along with my passport.
Okay.
And these things were made available. And the reason why they didn't go beyond for birth certificate was that passport and driver license were more
No,
valid.
because you were not born in hospital and probably didn't get birth certificate.
I mean,
I do have.
don't answer for the man. The man answer for himself. Yeah. So where did you do the registration?
I drove to the National Identification Registry and did that when they announced it because I really believe in data.
I said, who carried you there? I said, where did you do it?
I did it to their office.
To their office, right? Have
Who's
they given you a card?
They gave me a car, but the car expired, and those are some of the debate I have. How will I be a citizen and my existence will expire?
And
No.
why?
Hey, man, if card expired, that means your existence expired.
No. So even in the United States,
the reason why I'm asking Depo this question is based on what his concerns are. So Depo, we know that since 1822, these things were not done. So there is a cutoff point. So those who were born earlier on, there is a process. Like you were born before, like me, I was born before. All of us here were born before the National Registry was established in 2011. And I too went through the same process that you went through. That's why I was asking you. I too went through a process where they took my passport, they took this, they took that, they verified my fingerprint and all that stuff. They went as far as even asking for birth certificate for some of the staff that we had because they didn't have these other identifiers. Some people didn't have passports, so they went and asked for all these things. Somebody in our entity did not have a lot of records, so we had to, because everybody was not going to take pay, so we had to go around cycles to make sure that the person got their documentation. So there was a process that has been established and to verify these things that you provided. And then
can I ask Depo a question?
The National Identification Registry is in the process right now. They are even in the interior. What is hampering their work is the fact that they are constrained budgetarily to pay some of the contractors and things like that. But yet and stay, their processes stay on. Right now they're identifying farmers. There's a whole process. So
can I ask Depo a question?
It is not a conducting.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so
census.
So you said
process.
You said your national ID expired. When your passport expired, do you expire?
My passport.
No, when your passport expire, just answer the question. When your passport expire, do you expire or do you expire, or do you simply say I want to renew this passport? Because let me tell you how it works in the United States. Okay, your passport is valid for 10 years. When you go to renew your passport, you know what they ask you to do? They say send in the old passport with your new picture.
Yep.
Because they still have your biometric data. They don't say report to the nearest crematorium so we can extinguish you.
We are not going to be going for 5 years. The passport, let me say this to you. The economic side of that suggestion on our tier 9 and I would argue on it is that the first thing that there to get the data is difficult. You have capacity constraint. The access to information, the access point for people to collect data is difficult. And you already have limited number of people that are coming, and you're giving a limited time span to come back. Then
I agree that's a flaw.
Then another thing that there is that, in terms of the national identification, it's not supposed to just be an independent firm that stand by itself and say we are going this direction. It should have a link with all other agencies or ministry that are doing, let's say, for example, the way you're having the government tax areas.
That's what the song you've been singing here. That's why everybody.
Where you have the Ministry of Health.
Did you miss the part where I said that the National Identification Registry is a service bureau to all agencies needing identification? So to the extent that the NEC needs identification, they will essentially contract with the National Identification Registry and say, this is what we need. We need a biometric identification, but maybe to speed up our own process, we want you to capture the person's voting precinct. They could do that.
Yes, so
if they are
we need to proceed to the other side.
I agree with you, but election comes every 6 years. Why what are some of the entities that we have besides the Election Commission that we can
We
use to
have
bring in
known,
this?
we have known since 2017 and the ECOWAS report that this needed to be done. The reason it wasn't done was exactly so that we can be in the position we are in. Because the way the government of Liberia works is, oh, this is urgent. It works on the squeaky wheel principle. We know that it's breaking the law, but right now, we are so desperate that we have to break the law.
Exactly.
That's exactly how it's working.
That's the problem.
The law is clear, therefore, it's clear as day. Okay? That's what the law says. But now, the argument that you are just advancing is, it is so urgent that we get people registered to vote, so let's just let the NEC do it. It's not the NEC's job.
So I think we need to maybe take comments and then move to the other side of the.
So let me take a step back and see some of the comments before I raise another question, because I got 4 questions now.
Okay.
4.
Yes.
We passed the crematorium piece.
The crematorium issue, they allow me to address it because, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't see it right for my identification. The national identification is different from your passport.
Depu, as a
here's the
technologist,
question I have for Depu.
As a technologist, Depu, you are not going to get an argument from me. That process needs to be changed. It needs to be a 10-year ID. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't mean it can't be fixed.
So is the argument that George making different from what you're making, Depu? Is there any part of the argument that George is making different from what you're making?
If had I been here earlier, probably this interruption would have come. But it's also equally so important for listeners.
You allow him to say what he said. Then you said this is where I disagree with you. Then he can bring clarity, and then we move on. But you come in all this question not knowing where he started from, and I think he's trying to clarify. And you keep
the process is not clear.
Right.
Okay. There are things that need to be fixed in the NIR's process. Nobody is saying that it is perfect. That is not our argument. The argument is that you will achieve perfection if you allow the agency to perform as it was designed.
So
as a service bureau to every other government agency that needs identification. Those agencies will come to the NIR with their requirements and say, we need to identify XYZ people for so long, and this is the piece of data that is unique to us that we want you to include.
So now I have a question. What are the incentives that will make citizens to see this attractive to get involved?
It doesn't have to be an incentive. It's a national.
But that's a good question.
Incentive.
Hold on. That's a great question.
It's a national economic incentive for the entire country, not one person.
So basically, we'll take any developed country. Whatever you want to do, you need a national identification to do it.
Thank you.
Whether you want to get a license to drive,
any person requesting a service from the government or a license from the government, that's your incentive. And you see Alex Coffey, you know why he got his? Because he ain't getting, we're not going to get paid. That's incentive.
We're not going
Isn't that incentive?
We're not going to pay people for them to get a national ID.
No.
In America, you don't have a social security number. You can't work.
Mr. Tukwa, Mr. Fambola, let me say, I'm just saying this thing for you guys. As one who sits in Kawe Ken, who has no government salary, he has nothing to say. If you don't pay this, you cannot have that. What will motivate this guy to say it's a matter of money?
No, we're not asking him. We're not even asking him to pay for it. Because because as a voter, he's not paying for his voter ID. So he's going to get an identification that is paid for through the National Election Commission. But here's why it's important for that guy in Kawikin. Because thinking as a healthcare administrator, at some point, we want to have a basic healthcare delivery system where we know who we are giving health services to. Okay? Being able to have that identifier in a national health record allows us to do what? To deliver health services specifically to the individual. When you give people vaccines, how do you know you give everybody the same vaccine?
Identify them.
You got to identify them, boss. When you go to the doctor here, don't they ask you at some point for your unique identifier, your social security number?
Point,
they ask you for it.
Before you check in, they ask you for your
so you can say, oh, the guy in Kawenkan, he doesn't interact with the government. Guess what? He gets vaccinations. He gets very simple things from the government that we don't see as a benefit. But right now, because we can't identify those people, we don't even have a way to be efficient in the delivery of those services.
I've said that before. That's a fact.
Yeah. So now I like the way the conversations go. I think comment because the hospital data, the education data, argument coming up. Instead of looking for 100 points, I mean 70 points.
This perspective from hold on now, because people can't be deluded. This perspective from Jimmy Eastman are on the screen here. A roadmap to national identification is not through the NEC, is not through hospitals. They can be supporting agencies.
Exactly. So you could. So Jimmy, what you could do is you could have an NEC officer with his system.
George, to a point,
in every bank.
Exactly what you're saying. That's what Jimmy is saying. He's saying it's a roadmap. Now, Depu is asking a question that, where are you going to collect this data? Or what's the incentive? If I go back, so these are the incentive. The incentive to vote. So the NIR could be getting its data from even farmers. The incentive for them to give you farmers implements and stuff like that mean you must bring your what? Your security card. I mean your ID card. For you to go to school, you must bring your ID card. For you to open
market women,
you must bring your ID card. For you to get paid, you must bring your ID card. So that's what Jimmy is saying. That these are the incentive for people to get their ID card.
Joe Monju,
including the keke drivers. Before you drive a keke, you must produce this.
Yes, the entry points. Those are all the entry points.
And that is what Jimmy is saying.
No, that's not what you were saying before. Your entry
that
point
is what
is
Jimmy is saying. There's a full stop to the system.
So here's the thing, right?
Entry point here, NEC cannot be the only place, Mr. Tuba.
No. Listen, boss man. What you will have is you will have NEC NIR officers in all of the places where those identifications are required. So you will have an NIR officer who is at a bank. He is a government entity. His job is to collect that data at the bank. So everybody is not going to that one location. Even for people to get assigned stalls in the marketplace, okay, they would need to get that national identification. Joe Monju just asked a question. The country does not have an address system. So how does this factor into the debate of national identification? Joe Monju, let me suggest to you that you go ahead and look at what3words.com. WHAT, the number 3 words.com. Okay, that system is already in existence and it can be used to create an address for every person in Liberia. It already exists.
Please say that slowly. Please say that slowly.
1 second. Every space on the globe has been identified by a 9-meter, 3 by 3 meter square space.
Yep.
Okay. It has a name and has 3 words. And the system that will create that is called What 3 Words. So go to what3words.
The number 3. The number 3. What? The number 3 words. WORDS.com.
And then go
so
and click on any point in Liberia is identified. So even
you
now,
can identify the front door.
There are people in Liberia right now using What 3 Words for their business deliveries and stuff like that. So it's something that can be used for our address system, for our real estate, for multiple purposes by different people.
It can identify your front door versus your back door.
Gentlemen, that does not answer Joe Menu's question. Yes, it's available, but it does not create
it doesn't.
An address system for Liberia. It doesn't.
Right, we need to do it.
We need to create that.
We need to do it.
And you get a number to your house?
Yeah, so let me give you an example. Let's say the legislature passes a law that the addressing system in Liberia will be integrated with what 3 words? And what is considered the front door for every address will be your address, your what 3 words address. It doesn't say go to 25 Broad Street. It says if you go to this what 3 word address, it will put you at the front door of 25 Broad Street.
And this can be simply by how the streets are laid out, by the number of buildings,
So everybody
numbering system, and what
I'm still-
address system we can build on national.
Can I bring my next question?
No, let's move forward here.
Let's go on to the comments, guys. Let's go on to the
What the right
comments.
pronunciation for it in? Depu or Defu?
Depu.
Depu. Okay.
So let's move forward here. Okay, so we got to move to the economic side because there's a lot of comments. We got to move to our comments as
Do
well.
we have time to do that? Because I think we're
Yeah,
over there.
before we do, we're just about time. Before we do that, George and Ava,
Isaac,
we talk, right? So where are we now, and what's the way forward? Because when I read on the one of the articles you prepared, and when I read the law, the NRR is clearly supposed to do this whole biometric ID system, right? So you have, for example, the act creating the NRR, the National Identification Registry, on August 8, 2011. 3.1 of it said the general function of the registry shall be to design, establish, maintain, and implement the National Biometric Identification System, NBIS, of the Republic of Liberia. 3.2, in furtherance of its general function as set forth hence above, the registry shall have the following specific function. It goes A, B, C, D all the way. And A is I just read A, to design, establish, and acquire the technical infrastructure control procedure that serve as platform for implementing the National Biometric Identification System, to collect, organize, and all this stuff. So what is the way forward for our personal identity, which the NRR already started, such that we don't conflict with all these systems, so that it becomes a service to even the
Let me give you an example to that question.
Even law enforcement, because in investigation, you need to identify people.
I'll give you an example to that question. Everything you need identification for.
Yes.
So George and I have a common friend, right? He believes that the NRR is the keeper of record, the keeper of identification on that process.
Mm-hmm.
But because he has a vested interest in another institution that is doing biometrics, he is willing to go ahead because his excuse is, oh, NRR ain't got the backbone. They don't have the leadership. That's not the reason why you go and cannibalize or go and let another institution like the NEC do the registration. That is totally wrong. If you have principles, you don't do that. You stand and fight for NRR to do that. And if they need your professional services, then you go to NRR so they can use your professional services. But you're not let them use it for NEC or for what they call the people name,
but
NASCAR. So the key is for them to have, like, at the national level, even the president can get involved in that discussion. Let it be clear, that's the law. Let everything go to the NRR, and then the agency can extract the information they need for the NRR to use for identification purposes.
So the information, for example, right now they've called before the House, I believe, discussion about the NEC's contracting process and all of that. Did nobody ever, and I've sent this to Senator Dillon, who is my senator, Deputy Speaker. And the question is, at some point, somebody needs to say, but you all don't even have the authority to do this. Because if you look at what you just read, Alex, in order for the NEC to do what it is doing, it has to perform these exact functions that are detailed in the NIR law.
So D says to design, produce, and issue biometric card, each with a unique identification, identifying number to be called a social security number, to be the primary government-approved identity number for registry of birth, death, passport, immigration document, bank account, driver license, social security benefit, and other identification documents, supported by adequate and appropriate security features to address the challenges of possible fraudulent duplication.
So now, the phrase in there, and other identification functions, that was put in there to future-proof the law.
Okay.
Basically, any other new identification function that comes up will be held under this law. For somebody, because one argument some lawyer made to me was, well, they didn't specifically say election, so they can do it. So then my argument is, so every entity that is not named in the law can now create the same system over and over and over. There's a cost to this. There is a cost. And the cost savings in having one entity doing it is that it will only be done once. Multiple agencies doing it, it will be done multiple times, and then you have a system where each person has multiple identifications, and that is bad for our economy.
So what I'm hearing you guys saying is that the National Identification Registry should be allowed and should be funded to complete the national identification process. I agree with Depu in a sense that we shouldn't a national identification shouldn't expire. I mean, you should be able to reapply for one when you lost your card or something, but it shouldn't say every 5 years you go back. I don't know why they are doing that. Maybe it's because they're trying to prove the system. But
I agree with that. You're not going to get an argument from anybody.
Yeah, because we don't have a social security system. That's why. That's the only.
What I'm understanding. What I'm understanding you guys is saying is the way forward is allow the National Identification Registry to carry on its function as per its law and allow all these other agencies to feed off from it.
Correct.
So, Alex, let me come in. One of the things that is very much sad that this current administration had really frustrated itself and the people of Liberia is that the underutilization of the county service center. When you look at the county service center, is where almost all the issues that had to do with national identification, data, everything, that's the entry point where you will have the finance, the Ministry of Health. In fact, it's supposed to be issuing driver license and everything to these points. And it becomes an opportunity where you have an agent of NIR sitting in to make sure to verify before you are qualified for anything that driver license. And no, go to this person. Do you have this? No, you don't have it. Okay, go on the other side. It is more. It's an opportunity to bring more entry into the fold from tax collection to let's say vital statistics, everything right there.
And you will never get a disagreement with me.
I totally agree with you.
100% I agree with you.
We need 7 centers in every district, if you ask me.
Correct. We are all in agreement. So I think therefore the only thing we are talking about here is we agree with the concept behind the national identification. We agree with the law, and we're only talking about now how do we implement it.
That's what I thought this show was supposed to be about, right?
It is delivered on a broader base.
So Josh, what are we leaving off the table now that we're running out of time? But what are we leaving off the table economically? What could be the economic benefit, or what is the economic impact
I don't think we have
you know,
time to answer all that question.
Yeah,
Well, I can answer that question very briefly because I wrote Madam Selly a letter about this. We cannot grow as an economy if we remain a cash economy.
Nope.
We can't. The only way you transition from a cash to a credit economy is you have to be able to identify people and their assets.
Absolutely.
Okay? And when you talk about becoming a credit economy where a car sells for $30,000 and somebody has to work 4 years to buy a car, imagine now somebody could buy a car with a $5,000 deposit. How many cars are you now going to sell?
A ton.
How much revenue is the government going to make on the sale of each of those vehicles? The places that Liberians are locked out of the economy is in access to capital.
Without question.
Okay? Mm-hmm. Every single part of the economy where Liberians are locked out is because we do not have access to capital. The Guineans who come and operate transportation in Liberia, you know why they can do it?
For money.
Because they have their own source of funding.
And I just got that from a discussion with one of those pictures for entrepreneurs in Liberia or whatever that name is.
Okay. The people who are building homes the people who are building these high-rise buildings, the foreigners, they have their own source of funding.
But Liberians do. For example, George, you are Liberian. You got a prime property on the boulevard. You lease it to somebody for, let's say, even $20,000 a year for 50 years, right? $1 million. But that person, in 1 year, they can get a loan from a bank, sometimes even a bank outside the country, get a $500,000, $600,000 loan, put up a building that has maybe 50
Four
units.
stories. I know where you're going with this. 4 stories with 4 apartments on each story, and they rent each of those apartments for $3,000 a month.
Thank you.
And they only pay me $20,000 a year. So again, if we cannot identify our people, if we cannot identify our assets, we cannot grow our economy, and Liberians cannot have access to capital. Today, and we will never own our own economy. If you look at any economy, I challenge anybody who says they are an economist. I challenge you to show me a different formula that has worked other than that.
Depu smiling, come in, my man.
No, I don't want to go to economic debate. I have 4 questions. I only asked 3. I mean 2.
Depu, there's no economic debate to be had.
There's no economic debate about that.
There is no modern economy.
I have my question I want to ask.
So we're winding down.
Yes, but this is very much important because
before you come in,
you are discussing the NIR that has a link to
Before you come in, we raised an issue here about expiration of and the national identification, and Sam Wallo is saying if it has a photo attached to it,
it has to. He is 100% correct. Just like I said with the passport.
Okay.
You have to update your passport photo.
Yeah.
Or go to the crematorium.
In America, we don't have photos on our ID card, on our Social Security card.
I'm interested in this whole issue. What is the relationship between this whole NIR debate and that of the data collection that had to do with the census?
So that was in fact, you just took that question from my mouth, because I was trying to come in from Joseph Cummins here, who was trying to ask for the census. So that was the last question I was going to ask. So
okay. So let me answer that question.
Between the census and this NIR?
There is not.
Okay.
Let me tell you why.
Go ahead.
The census counts the number of people in the country.
Yes.
It doesn't distinguish who the citizens are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The reason you do the census is so that the government can forecast in terms of the services the people who live in the country will need.
Yep.
No,
Not everybody who lives.
Let me point of correction.
okay.
Hold on.
Let him land. We gotta let
let me
people
land.
talk one at a time.
Not everybody who lives in the country is a citizen, but everybody who lives in the country gets services from the country in one shape, in one form or another. So even when they were having this census debate in the US, one of the things the Trump administration wanted to do was to not count people who were foreigners or who were quote unquote illegal. And the court said they couldn't do that.
Yes, but the
So-
thing
so-
here
Wait,
is
to a point,
Hold on.
to
Let
a
me
point,
come in for a little
to a
bit.
point. Before you come into a point, I'm not too clear when you said to count the number of people in the country.
Okay, let me
As
give you an
opposed
example.
to, as opposed to counting the citizens of that country. How do we know the citizens?
mean,
How
it
do we know that
includes-
20 million people in our
Hold
country?
It includes everybody in the
The
country.
census does not ask you for identification or proof that you're a citizen. The census enumerators, they are trained in a certain way to determine if somebody is Liberian. Obviously, anybody white you know, they're not Liberian because just by our law. So they do identify other citizens from other countries, they identify foreigners, but just like you said,
All right.
everybody in the country receives services from the government one way or the other. Okay, so they count everybody. The census is a counting process, is an extraction of demographic information from people to be able to do certain studies and everything like that from a social.
I'm talking about all that stuff. I'm talking about other one. I'm saying, for example, you say that America has 360 million people, Nigeria has 200 million people. So
Right.
there are 200 million people in the country at the present time, whether
Correct.
citizen or nothing.
Yep.
It does
Correct.
not include those are
And that's
abroad
not-
too.
And that's
No,
still
no.
not a perfect number. It's not a perfect
Let me give you the most
So it
recent
just
fact.
count the number of people in the
Let-
country.
Let me give
That's
you
it.
the most
So
recent.
assuming formula they were going to do the census on that Friday, and President were not in the country, so that means President will not
They don't get counted.
But let me give you guys the most recent fascinating the most recent fascinating thing I found out. Qatar. Do you know how many citizens of Qatar there are?
No.
Who?
15,000.
467,000.
Okay.
What?
The
467,000.
yes, the population of Qatar is about 3 million.
Why?
You see the difference?
Qatar? Are you talking about Qatar?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yes,
Qatar.
there are more foreigners in Qatar than citizens.
They got 300. Okay, he said 400,000. I'll get him 500,000 just for the sake of the argument.
For the citizens.
Okay, there are
They
500,000
are moving
Qatari
toward
citizens
500,000.
of
They
the
are
3
moving toward
million people
500,000.
that
They're
live
saying
in the country.
400,000.
Only
Oh, okay.
500,000 of them are citizens.
But most
Oh.
of the people in Qatar, the regular Qatar citizens, they got other people working for them. Their life
So-
is compared with everybody else.
So let's take for example.
So therefore, the
let's-
And then the
difference.
census question not answered yet.
Yeah, we answer the
That's why
question.
they
That's what I was
I
coming
think
to.
we need
Let's
to
answer the
answer.
question.
Just answer the question. Like I think
We
as,
need to go. We need to go. So let's answer
yeah.
The
the question.
census counts the number of people present.
Okay.
Okay, it's not a count of the number of citizens.
And it's not
Let's
an
take-
identification either.
It's not an identification process. Let's take, for example, if you need to build a school. If you have a census, it can tell you what the demographics are for children from kindergarten to 12th grade. It doesn't matter whether or not those people are actually citizens.
George, let me give you an example. You know how when
They need to be in school.
when they did a revised constitution, they said each district will have 10,000 people, right? So let's say there was a law a zoning law for schools that any town or any city with 1,000 citizens must have elementary school, kindergarten, elementary school, junior high school. So the census serves that purpose to get that information as to what kind of development will go in any area based on the population. But the stuff about counting foreigners, that has to happen because you have to know everybody. You have to know the congestions in cities in different locations. You have to know whether you need to incent people to move. Right now, don't you all think we need some kind of incentive for people to decongest Monrovia and be able to populate other areas, especially when we talk about agriculture, when we talk about tourism and other services to people to generate more revenue? we need to do that. But we don't know the actual number. Some people even believe there are more than 1.5 million people in Montserrat County.
Don't you know? Don't you need a census data to determine the total number of national you have, so that you can corroborate that information with the NIR? Because if you say
no, that's two different things.
They're two different things.
At the end of the day, if the NIR say everybody registered, these are all the citizens in Liberia.
As a matter of fact, the NIR has to register everybody.
Right, one second. And then during the census, let's say some of those people were in Ivory Coast, were in Guinea, it will be all of our few.
The NIR has to register everybody, not just citizens.
They don't have to be equal.
Everybody who comes to Liberia, if you get an authorization to work, you would get a social security number.
Yep.
That's the function of the NIR. So it's not limited to citizens.
Yes, but you can do a query to dissect
and say
data,
correct.
Get only citizens and know who are registered. So, for example, let's say someone picking came from Freetown for this census that going on. He been here long enough for him to sound Liberian, and they go ask him, and they begin to call. He say, "Oh, from Lofa." So they will count him as being born in Lofa. Where you living now? Oh, I live in Nima. They will say he living in Nima. So the census dissects your original place of birth, your county of residence, wherever you're doing, the amount of people in your household, all those kind of information come with the census. So there's a lot of rich data that comes with the census that can be used for so many purposes. Unfortunately, we don't do that.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. Gabriel, I think we got to wrap this thing up.
Well, I think Depu got one more question, right?
It's okay. Let me leave the for next time when I come late. I will not hit. So, but at least
you know what, George, let Depu come our show so he ask all the questions.
Yeah, but he can even get on WhatsApp with us so we can have this discussion. No, but you see, this is what I gather from Depu, right? Depu is he's a bureaucrat. Okay,
a long time.
he's a bureaucrat. And sometimes when you're trying to create revolution, they got the people in government, they call them the weebies. You know who the weebies are?
Please do explain.
The weebies say, we be here before you came, we be here when you leave.
Unfortunately, don't just listen to my question and just think Depu is a bureaucrat. Anyway, I'm a revolutionist. I go with issue I want change. I hit and inquire more and what are the reform. I'm just looking for a way. You need to come out with your proposal, your discussion of solution to the problem in Liberia. And that's one of the things that focus on Liberia. Actually, we look at the possible solution. Identification of problem is one thing, but propounding solution these are things that I always push people when I come on the show with you. I don't care whether I know you, I go that way. So that you and I will have that tough stand, and from there you come up with some solution.
You have not walked away. Are you not walking away from the conversation, understanding clearly what needs to happen for us to move to one identification system?
The conversation have been very good. When I came in, I was trying to say, okay, how do we do the intersectoral linkages? Because originally I wasn't here, but I think it was good that we have this conversation. But as far as I'm concerned, the NIR, Mr. Tianangbe, I can always tell him he should be at the doorstep of all the ministry and agency before you provide any service. Before you provide any service to anybody, you make it a precondition. Where's your national identification? You won't go to the hospital?
I agree with you.
Identification. As you do that, people now will see those are some of the incentives that will make people to go for it. Because if you don't have this, especially for banks, you don't bring your ID card, national ID card, you're not going to receive your Western Union. Many people run for it straight. So
you can't even get a telephone without if you don't have one by a certain date.
Yep.
The carriers have to disconnect your phone.
Yep. But we just saw a notice from Sierra Leone. Similarly, saying
correct
in Ghana. I used to go Ghana before and just get a cell phone.
A SIM card.
If you don't have national ID card, you can't get a SIM card in Ghana.
Yeah, it's a national security
Yeah.
threat. Anybody
So
can go there and pick up phone and do
so
anything they want to do.
now with this relationship between census and the NIR, one of the things that I see clearly is that realistically, the data entry points in the various counties where you have the legist statisticians across the country, they themselves supposed to be working along with NIR to say, look, you know what? As far as we are concerned right now, for this month business registry, we have total number of business that registered in Lofa or Maryland County, and how many business owners are Liberians. And these are some of the things I'm talking about, intersectoral linkages. So Ministry of Commerce will say, you know, we have 5 persons that registered this month, and out of 5, we have 2 Liberians and 3 non-Liberians. How do you determine that? The NIR have picked up that, and that becomes a precondition. That's why you talk about the sectoral linkages. So you want to make it a national responsibility. It's just not about, oh, the NIR is supposed to be everywhere, but it should be ministry and agency understanding how important this data is, how important this is
And we agree.
national development.
Agree on the importance of data.
100% I agree with what you just said. You're not going to get an argument from me about that.
All right. So
Because
on the economic side,
these are things we've been crying for.
I mean, we out of time. We can't talk about that. We'll do that on another show. I want you guys to come back to explore the economic side. That's what I was looking for, but we didn't have time to get.
And that's a real critical side when it comes to identification. Like,
yeah,
like
I really would like to have a show dedicated to
until we
that.
identify what people who cannot unlock the potential of the Liberian economy.
Okay, I think we explored the possibility of continuing next Saturday. Hopefully, it's not definite, but we'll make that decision.
Right.
But I mean, I think the topic was stimulating, and people brought a different perspective.
But just on that again, do we have a platform where all Liberian professionals can cohabit as a community, a virtual community?
There isn't actually.
Okay, so a Liberian guy has done that, and I think I'm saying the information, Alex. I don't know if you have it, but I think it's something that we should all kind of get behind. Because
what is the link?
We discussed that. We discussed that.
FOREIUM Forum, FOREIUM.com.
We discussed that of.
That's the larger platform.
Alex, I just want to say that I'm glad that this topic was already up before coming, but it is important for us to consider the decision by the Ministry of Commerce on the increment in rice price. Having given subsidies.
We've already covered that.
You're late. Don't raise stone.
I mean, this is why we say be on time. On time.
So you guys don't want to give me a chance to.
That is not how things works around the world, my man. They play take out. You don't say it can't wait for you.
We talked about at the beginning of the test. I mean, at the beginning of the class, then you want to your own at the end.
I submit, but what I'm saying is that as you speak right now, it's a major economic issue across the country.
Okay.
In fact,
we not disagree. We had that conversation.
We already had that conversation.
I beg you. Let me just tell the people. Forum is a platform that we can really unite, collaborate on, build relationships, build connections, and a lot of information. But we can build the rich content for that particular place. So you go to Forum, you can go to the Liberia Global Professional Network. It's a section of Forum that's dedicated for only Liberians. You want to build a professional network on that.
You can bring it again, but...
No, not global, like global, whatever, man. Global Liberians, man. The other man are trouble, man.
All right, gentlemen, listen.
What is the actual website?
We have that.
Is it www?
Yeah.
Forum.com. FOREIUM. And when you register there, you register as a Liberian, your professional information is there. Then you go to Liberian Global Professional Network. That's the community that will be in.
Stay bringing global thing in.
Okay, look, man, guys, I got to bounce.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we gotta end the show, Gabriel.
Okay,
I mean, I think they've been going. So, my question to you guys in your closing statement: what is one thing that I know as I said, I hope we explore the economic side, but we'll get to that. But with this section, what is one thing that you want the audience listening to this should take away? Like either you can look at it from us, this is a problem, this is the solution that we want to address. Each of you,
Okay.
maybe 2 minutes each.
For me, the one thing I want people to come away with is to understand that the National Identification Registry is the government entity that is supposed to register everybody for any biometric purpose. That's the one thing I want people to come away and to understand that we all people who have not registered with NIR, do your best to get registered with NIR. It's very important that we know who our citizens are, that we are able to utilize all these different benefits for them at the same time be able to receive benefits from them. Because if the government know our citizens, they know what areas they're in, there is so much better opportunity to plan programs, projects, project revenue, and everything that related to from a socio-economic perspective, and even from a political perspective, how things are evolving. So this just a passionate plea to our fellow Liberians to try to register with the National Identification Registry. What NEC is doing today to try to take away that role from the NIR and not work with them for them to be the keeper of records and then they extract the records is wrong. If some Liberians are out there who have the fortitude and can stand against the system, they need to take the neck to court to resist from this National Identification Registry process and let NIR handle the biometrics, and then they find a common ground where they can extract that data to be able to use it. So that's what I want Liberians to come away from this discussion with.
Thank you. Mr. Famule.
So I will echo what Isaac said. This has been a passion of mine for the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
This is, in my opinion, the single most important driver of economic prosperity for any country.
Right.
Our ability to identify our people and bring them into the formal economy and expand the role of government for them. But I would like to close with what Harvin the Shield wrote.
Mm-hmm.
He said, at the end of the day, there is absolutely no point in having laws which we persist in or insist on not following.
Mm-hmm.
You either revise or nullify the laws, or you implement and abide the laws. Failure to do so is a recipe for promoting and encouraging arbitrariness and uneven application of the law, which is fodder for chaos.
Beautiful. Depu, I know you had a lot of questions. I would like to hear your closing statement.
I think for me, national identification registry is very much crucial. Besides the national development component, which is very key. Globally, it's important in terms of the SDG goal 16 to have an inclusive and peaceful society. It require a structure system where it is mandatory, and most of the community in the whole world is moving towards having identification, a birth registration, national citizenship, to ensure that we have unique identification across the world. So it's better for the country to be ahead and ensure that its citizens are identified for development purpose. And on the economic side of it is that when you have your people identified, you know how to appropriate and plan for them better in terms of economic support, social and economic support to the society. So it's important for it to be encouraged across the globe, and the government of Liberia should make it mandatory for service provision, whether health service, education service, and whatever it takes. We need to make that as a cardinal point. Schools nowadays they ask for birth certificate before you register the student, and now they should also make it mandatory that you should provide a national identification before you register in the school. That is some of the things that will help us. These are the simple solution we're going to have. It's going to roll out better. It may not be as fast as we may want it, but these things will help us to catalog what we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex,
Yeah,
you have
very
anything to
important
add?
indeed. I mean, shortly, just very. Let me add this flavor to it. This is national identification is very important. Investigating financial crimes in Liberia and assisting law enforcement and prosecution. One of the challenges we had was both. It's not just a physical. I mean, personal identification alone. We had a challenge of personal identification and physical identification to find things that we wanted to build the cases and stuff like that. So in addition to the economic benefit and all the different benefits, national identification is very crucial to our country.
Yeah. Well, I honestly, I personally don't have anything to add to that. I think you guys did a good job. As I said, I wish we segmented it to cover the economic piece, but hopefully we can work with you guys to come back on that to just focus specifically on that aspect of it, because I think that's what I call the cream of the crops lies. So thank you guys for coming on here and sharing your thoughts. And we look forward to having you guys back again to explore the second aspect of it. For the audience, thank you guys for sticking with us. Hopefully you are able to take away something from on here. As we usually say on this show, regardless of how you thought the conversation was going, where you thought someone was being pro government or the other person was being pro opposition, what we always like to say is that the conversation we have here is to advance the country, to advance our democracy, to make Liberia a little better than where we left it. So this is what we always strive to do on this show. So thank you for joining us, and yeah, we'll see you next Saturday. And as we always say, we're all Liberian, and see you next Saturday. Thank you.
Peace.
We are Liberian.